Hello and welcome back to the MMA Split podcast. I am your host, Matt, joined in audio only form by host and producer Josh.
Good evening.
Good evening to yourself. We are minus Miguel, sadly, once again today. He was meant to be with us, but then got stuck with some horror emails that you never want to get at the end of your workday that are going to keep you in the office until God knows what hour. So our sympathies are with you. And although we would have loved to push this back, due to different scheduling conflicts, we'd already sort of had to push this podcast recording till close to the end of the week.
Yeah, I
So
can't,
as a
can't.
result,
So I was gonna say, I can't criticize Miguel because the reason we pushed it is because I had to go out drinking with my boss on our regular recording day.
yeah. And the reason I couldn't have done a day earlier than that is because I had a date on Monday. So I think we're all responsible. It does not matter. We are here, even if it is just the two of us. We are in audio only form because shit happens. And once I found out it wasn't going to be all three, and I realized I've slept about 6 hours in the last 7 days, I decided I needed to stay at home. And so we're doing it this way. But do not worry, we have got plenty to talk about. One of the great advantages to waiting till a later day in the week to record is we've had a lot more news come out in the last couple of days that we wouldn't have been able to talk about. So on the agenda, everything that happened on last weekend's card, UFC Vegas, Holly Holm versus Bueno Silva. We told you that the card was not exciting. Actually turned out to be pretty good. We're talking about the highlights of that card. It is, of course, as well, UFC London. UFC back in my hometown, back in my home city, back in my home country, back on normal, reasonable European hours of viewing. So excited about that, even if it's not quite as good a card as some of the recent London cards have been. And plenty of news. News on Tough, McGregor avoiding the sweep on week 8. We'll be discussing that. McGregor's been in the news for potential assault charges again. We'll be discussing that. Huge fight news, huge changes to previously existing fights, and a champion's had to vacate a belt. All of that is to be discussed. Before that, like the video, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, comment, share your thoughts, let us know how you feel. With all of that out the way, Josh, let's talk about last week's action first.
That's the
Surprisingly good card. A card that definitely didn't have the largest number of finishes, but ended up having some really good fights. One fight that did end in a finish, and a very impressive finish, was our main event. Mauro Bueno Silva has kind of gone from complete unknown to genuine title contender in what it feels like 3 fights. I know she's had more than that in the UFC, but it feels like it's
I
been the
mean,
last 2 or 3
no,
fights where
no.
she's really shot up the roster.
Yeah, let's say it's like last two fights really. Um, so I was just trying to think like when did she move up to bantamweight? Like it wasn't too long ago.
She
Um,
starts off at flyweight.
yeah, she had losses to Montana De La Rosa, Manon Fior, uh, beat Gillian Robertson. Um, had other fights there at 125.
You're right.
Um,
She lost
actually,
lost to Moroz, drew with Montana De La Rosa,
oh, sorry, yeah, Drew, of course.
and lost to Manon Fiorot. Beat Yan Wunan, or Wu Yanan, I should say, sorry. And then Stephanie Egger, Lena Landsberg. And then you got to say, the jump from Lena Landsberg to Holly Holm in terms of what that does for your career. I mean, this could be one of those examples where she is just coming hot in the right division at the right time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other thing is this division needs someone, um, and you know, if just putting like the right kind of win streak together, even if it's not the most impressive or the longest, it's definitely going to get you there. Because I mean, ideally, who do you think's going to be not necessarily the next bantamweight champ, but sort of at the end of 2023 and even at the end of 2024, like, you know, are we going to have like a sturdy dominant champ, or is it going to be a lot of churn? Can Misha Tate touch gold again? I assume Juliana Pena's going to be right up there. Like, how,
Well, here's the funny thing. So we've had this chasm, this hole that's been left with Nunes's retirement, obviously in two different weight categories, but certainly much more relevant at bantamweight in terms of
let's
other
say
fighters.
1.5 weight classes at this stage.
I think half's generous. I'd say maybe like a 1.2, but I'll go 1.5. We'll say 1.5. Bantamweight's an old weight class. Like you look at the top, the girls at the top, and the vast majority of them have already fought for a title at least once. Seem to generally be in their 30s. Holly Holm's obviously in her 40s. Raquel Pennington's been around for a while. Juliana Pena's been around for a while. Ketlin Vieira was kind of a slightly younger face, but even she's been in the UFC. You know, she's been in the UFC for a hot minute now. And I think she was going to be dropping down to flyweight before this retirement. So, you know, it's very easy, I think, for a Holly Holm, for a Pennington, for all these other kind of established girls to think, the monster is gone. This is our opportunity. Like, we've had to sort of eat shit for a few years. This is our chance to kind of take that sort of step up and finally, you know, be the champ that we weren't able to be, or be a more consistent champ than we were able to be when Nunes was around. And Mara Brenner Silva's, I think, is going to come up and just say, hey, guys, you don't know about me, but I'm younger, I'm motivated, I'm dangerous, extremely dangerous in two different areas of MMA. And at 31 years old, I'm not old news.
Nice, certainly. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is with Nunes gone is, do we see, the flyweight champs looking to move up more for two belts? Because obviously, like,
Yeah.
the winner of Alexa Grasso, Shevchenko, could viably be very, very competitive at 135. I mean, you assume that a woman that can beat Shevchenko and Shevchenko that can run it that close with Nunes, they're probably not going to be awful.
Well, also, I mean, I think Shevchenko is a real one to watch out for at bantamweight, because let's say she loses to Grasso. Well, she's looking at a competitive division, a flyweight division that in the last 4 years has gone from being one of the worst divisions in women's MMA to arguably one of the best, if not the best. I know there's only 3.5 as we just discussed, but even so, it's still kind of turned around.
Yeah.
Shevchenko might look at it. Let's say she loses to Grasso in September. Would she like the idea of having to fight? Who would there be? Maybe she has to fight Tyler Santos again. Maybe she has to fight Erin Blanchfield, or wait till Erin Blanchfield's the champ, and then you've got to beat that fucking monster to try and get the belt back. Not to mention Manon Fiorot, who might be an absolute monster on the feet. So there's a lot
And
of tough
has a
fights.
fight over Bueno Silva as well.
Exactly. So you look at that and think, man, like, if you have back-to-back losses to someone, you know it might take a couple of extra fights to get back there. And you've got these dangerous young contenders around there as well who might just prove to be too much of a problem. Or you could move up to bantamweight, where I think we can all agree Holly Holm isn't quite the, at 41, she's just not quite the same as the fighter that won the belt and fought Nunes in 2019 for the belt, and obviously had that fight with Cyborg and the fight with Jurain Durandamy. It's just impossible for her to still be that same person at 41. I feel Juliana Pena is very beatable. She's one of those fighters that can give anybody a problem but can get beaten by anyone.
Yeah,
very beatable.
absolutely. Sorry, you gave me a space there, and I was taking a quick drink. I apologize.
Oh, no, I apologize. No, I should have kept talking. And then you look at who else in the division. Like, I love Rocky Raquel Pennington, but it's really an absence of dangerous new contenders coming up that's allowed Pennington to kind of hang in there and still be at that title contending level. Like, listen, I like Rocky, but I don't think any of us have ever looked at her and thought that's a world champion level women's MMA fighter in front of us.
No, she's fucking solid, but she's more of like just like a pioneer, to be honest.
Well, she's a
Has
fun fighter. She's
Yeah,
scrappy. She's tough. She'll get in the pocket. She'll trade.
has holes.
But you can't. you can't tell me that if she weighs 5 pounds less and was fighting at 125, that she'd be having the same ranking.
Well, you think she'd
Hello?
be that much? Oh, wait, no, not because of the weight, just because of the weight class. I see now. Sorry, that was a
Yeah,
second.
yeah, just because
I had to
yeah,
think
just
about that
because
one.
of the yeah, just because of the level of competition. And you could kind of argue, even with Amira Bueno Silva, like, did she move up just because the weight cut was difficult? Or was this an element of like, fuck, I've just fought a couple of really tough girls. This is not an easy weight class. But hang on a sec, I can move up and beat Alina Landsberg and a 40-year-old Holly Holm, and all of a sudden I'm being talked about as a title contender.
Potentially. Kind of like at 125, though. I'm like, Andrade just won fights at 135. Blanchfield,
True.
I don't know. In my head, I'm like, maybe would be a bit undersized, but she's just so fucking good that, like, is her star going to be impacted that much? I don't know. Santos, she's a big girl. Manon Fior, same. Shevchenko's obviously like fought for the belt at 135. Um, Grasso, you'd assume would be okay as well. Fucking hell. I
Well,
think that whoever's at 135, their biggest challenge is always going to be the champ at 125. Until they get some fresh blood in there.
yeah. Well, Myra Brunner Silva is fresh blood, and I'll tell you, let's talk about the actual fight itself. I love a standing arm triangle, man. There's just something about it. The one against Andrade when she did it to Lemos, this one, there's just something horrifically brutal about it. Like there you are standing up. It should be the last thought on your mind that you can get choked out. And the fact that somebody can lock that in and choke out a Holly Holm, who is not an easy person to tap.
Yeah, technically a guillotine choke. It kind of looked sort of like a Das or Bravo choke, but it was like without the arm in. It was just like a modified. Um,
Oh, okay.
Looked really nasty, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, she had Holly Holm in that. And Holly Holm, we know that she fights out of submissions. I mean, obviously, she's been choked out once before in her career, obviously by Misha Tate when she lost the belt. But she didn't tap to that. Like, she was punching her way into unconsciousness. And even against Ketlin Vieira when she lost that fight, I remember Ketlin Vieira had, I think it was either a rear naked or a standing arm triangle choke. And Holly twisted and forced her way through it. But maybe that's something that Mayra Bueno Silva saw. Maybe she saw that there was a weakness to Holly getting locked into the into certain chokes in stand up clinches.
Yeah, no, potentially. Um, I mean, you know that her jiu-jitsu, her wrestling's just not on the same level as a stand-up game. Obviously, like the way she moves, she positions herself. She was looking pretty good in the first round. You know it's going to be a tough
Well, she
fight,
was.
but 5 rounds, if you've got submissions like that, you've got to fancy yourself at being able to snatch her neck at some point.
Also, one thing about Holly Holm is she has become less of a striker. She's really been somebody, particularly post the second the Nunes fight. We've seen her really somebody that she likes to get in that clinch. She likes to hold people up against the fence. Use her physicality and her athleticism. And obviously that can be very effective. But if you're not really from much of a jiu-jitsu background, anytime you're in those grappling clinch situations, you're at a bit of a disadvantage if you're fighting somebody that knows all the tricks and knows how to cinch and lock stuff up in those positions, because you're just not thinking in the same regards to they are. You're thinking in terms of control, or Holly Holm in this instance is thinking in terms of control. And obviously, Myra Bueno Silva is just picking up little notes. Okay, she's making a mistake here. This has been left exposed here. I can do this if we get back in this position. Takes advantage beautifully.
No, absolutely. I mean, Holly wants to like push her up against the fence and grind out the fight a little bit and make it ugly, but you have to mind your p's and q's. It's just it's a very dangerous game you play with certain jiu-jitsu artists.
No, very much so. But good win for Bueno Silva. Moving down the card and talking about dangers with jiu-jitsu. They go both ways. Jiu-jitsu can help you win a fight. It can also make you jump for guillotines that were never there and were a terrible idea, and turn what should be a win against a short notice guy and look impressive into a split decision win for our boy JDM, Jack Della Maddalena. And Josh, I'm going to pass this to you. What did you think of this scorecard? Because I'm going to put it out there. and I'll make a case for it after you said your piece. I feel this was a draw. I kind of feel like Hafez won the first 2 rounds,
And then
and
you
then it
gave him
should
a
have been a
10-8.
10-8 for Jack. Yeah, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Um, I can see the argument for a 10-8 in the third. I gave it as a 10-9. Um, to be honest, I'd probably edge the second round to Della Maddalena for damage, but I think first 2 rounds were reasonably close. It's very hard to predict with the judges, and you're starting to get an idea with certain judges on like how they're going to score it. So Saudi Amato and Kamijo, they both do tend to score damage a little higher than kind of control and grappling.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember. I think it was Saudi Amato that actually gave the decision to Hafez, but like no knock against the judges for trying to. Difficult thing to do. Saudi Amato does come out and try and justifies things occasionally. I actually saw it. There was allegedly. I don't know how they verified it, but a Las Vegas working MMA judge did an AMA on Reddit, and some of the stuff they said didn't even make me kind of think like, oh shit, like I thought that I had quite a neutral kind of in touch kind of like opinion with like the rule sets and assumed that most judges were that way, but some of it is just so subjective in some ways. Anyway, it was a close fucking fight. I could give it either way. I had it for Madalena, but I didn't give him a 10-8 in the third. So how do you,
Yeah, listen, my argument for this, the second round's very close. The only argument I'd say for giving it to Hafez is that the way people are kind of describing it is this, well, Hafez had the control, but Jack was piecing him up on the feet beforehand. Jack was just about getting the better of the strikes, but if you rewatch round two, Hafez is trading with him. Like, it's not like Hafez is just getting pieced up on the feet and then getting a couple of takedowns and 2 minutes of control time. He's maybe just outstruck, but he's landing pretty much, a good number of shots himself. And so for me, it's that kind of combination of, well, I didn't feel Jack had enough of a striking lead to compensate for the amount of time he spent on his back. But what I would say, and I think this is, to be honest, I think this is only because Hafez was, particularly after the first round, quite mindful of energy, took the fight on short notice, didn't really have a full camp to prepare. But I did think maybe he just didn't quite have the gas tank to maximize those positions he was in at the end of the second round. If he'd landed a few elbows or managed to get some good ground and pound off, you kind of know he probably swings that second round. And looking on how the fight goes, with none of the judges giving the third a 10-8, probably would have got the decision. What you do say is it's a good loss for Hafez, and it's not the best of wins for JDM, who obviously was on this kind of like fast track, could be a guy that shoots up the rankings. And I know he had 2 weight cuts close proximity. It's a short notice replacement for him as well.
I think that would be the biggest thing. Ultimately, he made a couple of big mistakes and still came away with a win. People are fickle. They won't put an asterisk on it. It will just go down as a win on the record. And I think Dana will give him the credit for accepting the short notice replacement. Hafez will get some love. He needs to make the most of the next opportunity. JDM is just gonna. I think he's just gonna keep moving forward. Obviously, he had a huge highlight reel knockout. It would be a much better advancement. It's a missed opportunity, but Hafez is no bum. I don't know how likely that was ever going to be. He had plenty of opportunity to kind of like to ring his bell, and like you said, Hafez was trading with him. I don't think he was effective enough in the second, but he certainly had some good shots throughout the fight. Gave JDM reason to think. If they had the full fight camps, it just comes down to how many fucking mental mistakes is JDM going to make in the real fight. But he's going to move forward. He'll probably fight in September, and it won't hurt him too much as long as he performs in the next fight. It's just going to be one extra number on the win streak.
Well, listen, and just to confirm, I'm not saying that there should be an asterisk on the winner. Or
anything like that. That's my language, because I know we've talked about this before, and I've said like MMA fans are very fickle. We don't put an asterisk on the weird wins. If you win because they got injured, fluke cut when you were losing the fight, shit like that. Some people remember, but for the vast majority, it just goes down as a win. And if you're on a win streak, it's just a bigger win streak.
Yeah. I think more than an asterisk. I think what it's more a case of is, if Jack Della Maddalena, you think about who he was originally meant to fight. He was going to be fighting Sean Brady, and that's the level that they thought that he was at. And you kind of look at this and you go, how would that fight have looked if he's fighting a Sean Brady on a full camp? And then you also have to look at it and say it's not like you thought you were fighting Kevin Holland and then you fight Basil Hafez. Your opponent change was not the biggest difference in terms of style of the original opponent that you were preparing for. And I
Style,
think what's
no,
clear.
but movement and power, yes. And I think that if
True.
JDM lands the shots he does in the first 2 rounds on a Sean Brady's not getting out of there.
No, but what I'd also say is this is the first, what I'd say, pure grappler that we've seen JDM have to go against in the UFC. And what's been shown is that there's an ability to take him down. He doesn't seem to have the best reactions at all times to being taken down. And there are holes there. Now, it might be that this is the best thing for him because he gets the win. Some of these things get exposed. He can go back. He can work on those things and come back improved. But what I'm saying is that let's say that he'd fought Sean Brady and let's say he'd knocked Sean Brady out in 2 minutes or something like that. His next fight's probably inside of the top 10. And by that point, he had hype. So they're probably going to try and find a favorable matchup. And all of a sudden, you might not have these things being exposed until you're fourth or fifth in the world. And then they get really exposed. You know what I mean? By somebody like an RDA, by somebody like a Colby, by somebody like a Bilal.
Perhaps, I don't think it's a lack of ability. I think it was a couple of stupid decisions.
Fair enough.
You know,
And he won the fight.
Yeah.
Good fight. Very fun fight, actually. One of many fun fights on this card. Anything else you want to say on JDM before we move down?
Nah, let's go a little quicker on these, I think.
Yeah, we don't need to go. I don't think we're going to go fight by fight on these. Obviously, a bit of a shame. Walt Harris versus Josh Parisian. Walt Harris popped for some tainted supplements or something like that. So we lost that fight.
Josh Parisian's getting another fight soon, though, isn't he?
Yeah, he's going to bounce back.
Beautiful thing about heavyweights, you don't have to worry about the weight cuts in the camp.
Oh, yeah. And let's be honest, with the size of some of these guys, how hard are these fight camps for them, really? I don't think they're really pushing the cardio quite as hard anyway as it is compared to other weight classes. But that is just my controversial opinion.
I think it's fair to say with Josh, yeah.
Yeah, at the very least. Let's look at some of the impressive finishes on the card. Francisco Prado runs through an Otman Zaitar that just doesn't quite look like he is what we thought he was, really.
Well, I mean, Potato Boy got done there, and I don't know why he was protesting the stoppage. You know, you had forever and a day to kind of move or protect yourself, and you could not.
No. And that's kind of a couple of fights now in a row where he's been steamrolled. Obviously got steamrolled by the Frivola previously. Prado, who is a good fighter, looking impressive, making short work of him. Big win for Park Jun-yong, the Iron Turtle. 7 out of the last 8, 4 in a row. Survives a bit of early pressure. Once he starts hurting him, putting the pressure and the combos on, the fight was only going one way.
Yeah, it was a great performance. The dance at the end, as much as I love the Iron Turtle, his walkout, his smile, his fight style, I don't want to see him dance again. That guilty feet have no rhythm. I don't know what he felt guilty about, but he had no fucking rhythm. It was a great fight, though. Great performance.
I had no issue with this dance. Let the man enjoy himself. He's a showman. He's an entertainer. He's a hell of a good fighter. And I think his next fight's a ranked guy. I think he's deserved it.
Has to be. He's been so competitive against guys that have edged him and gone on and taken that hype, and you know he's right fucking there.
He kind of reminds me a bit of Sean Strickland in terms of his fighting style. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like great cardio, good chin, decent defensively, heavy on the boxing, but he'll throw a few kicks in there, but loves trading in combination.
Fights like a fucking zombie.
Yeah. Maybe the zombie's a better comparison.
Well, you know what? I think the kind of best one would be Matt Brown because he's got that power as well. You know, he could be something of a knockout artist. He's got some grappling chops. He's got the fight IQ, but more than anything, it's just the aggression and just being a fucking zombie. He was so close to putting away RoboCop before he got done. He's
Yeah, well,
just
Robocop's
I think Matt Brown would be my zombie of choice comparison.
fair enough. It's a good comparison. We don't need to talk about this fight, but obviously Norma Dumont versus Chelsea Chandler led to one of the funniest moments this year in mixed martial arts, where it's very. I've
It's
seen
smart. It's
guys
smart.
circle away,
I've seen
but to
McGregor do
just
that shit.
turn,
He didn't run straight into the cage, but I saw McGregor do that against Nate Diaz. And as much as I hate McGregor, you know that got him
he
that
survived.
helped him survive and win a fight, and that got Chelsea Chandler through that first round. Probably wasn't worth it by the end of the fight, but
No,
you know, fair play to her. Just survival
and
modes, and she did. She fucking survived.
and just to make you laugh as well, Chelsea Chandler shows that she's got a great sense of humor. She tweeted a picture of the moment where she started turning around and just sprinting in the other direction. And it was a still of that video, just a freeze frame, with written above it, it was at this moment I knew I fucked up. So she's got a sense of humor about it. She can laugh at herself, and I respect that.
Fair
And
play.
Norma Dumont's kind of, I mean, let's be honest, Norma Dumont's not great, but she is the one featherweight that you look at that's like, yeah, you're not bad. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you're not just there because you can't be good enough to fight in another category. You literally can't make bantamweight, but you look pretty good against these other featherweights. I mean, a 10-2 record has some good names on a record.
like who else has women's featherweight? Like, is it just Invicta?
Bellator's got featherweight.
I thought they had
No, PFL's
what
got
did they?
lightweight.
Yeah,
Bellator's got featherweight because they've got Cyborg as the champ.
of course, yeah. Oh shit, yeah, Liam McCourt, yeah. Um,
And if you believe the rumors that Ronda Rousey is being touted for a 145 return to the UFC, and if you combine those rumors with the rumors that the UFC are interested in purchasing Bellator, there is a potential route for the UFC to have a genuine 145 division. Because if they get some of those Bellator fighters, okay, listen, a lot of them used to be in the UFC. Maybe they're not going to want to go back to the UFC. But all of a sudden, you'd have Cyborg, Kat Zingano, what's her name? A few others that I can't think of off the top of my head because I don't watch enough Bellator, but you'd actually have a roster
you got
of
Liam
145
McCourt, and I'm
fighters.
blanking on the
That's
other
the one.
Irish girl. Jesus Christ, I'm embarrassed myself. Sinead Kavanagh. You've got
Now,
you got a bunch of decent 145ers. Thing is, if the UFC did buy them, they'd be the only game in town. But I really think that PFL are going to be the ones to get it done. In fact, if the UFC bid, I
yeah,
think it's just to try and prevent PFL from doing it, and they'll end up paying over the odds.
maybe.
And that's
But the
not
UFC, I don't know.
really their attitude now. You know, they're more cost cutting than investing heavily in market share.
No, but like you say, it would give them the opportunity of basically only having PFL as a direct competitor in the American market. And PFL is noticeably different in their structure. So they'd be a competitor that you could argue isn't quite doing the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. But I think from a fighter's point of view, you look at the contracts they have in the UFC, you'd be keeping your fucking fingers crossed that PFL get it done.
Oh, yeah, I think
Just knowing that you're
the problem,
guaranteed at least 2 fights a year.
well, listen, I
Having the
think
opportunity to make that
if
$1 million, it's just a lot, I think. And the sponsors.
I think if the UFC were to buy Bellator, I think you'd end up with a situation where Scott Coker would walk away very happy because he'd be given probably the largest bag, and all the fighters on his rosters would be very unhappy. Minus maybe, I think the Pitbull brothers wouldn't mind being in the UFC. I think somebody like an AJ McKee would embrace it. But all the roster, like all the guys that kind of left the UFC and the TIFF to get paid better at Bellator, those are going to be some salty motherfuckers who are not going to be interested in re-signing contracts.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, Corey Anderson, that man is going to have a fucking fit.
Yeah, Nemkov on the other hand.
Nemkov, I'll be honest, I would not mind seeing a rematch of Nemkov versus Yuri.
That'd be pretty fucking cool.
That would be pretty good. I mean, listen, 145, you'd immediately have, you'd get some great fights. Like, you'd be talking about, like, we'd have divisions as stacked as we did when Strikeforce got absorbed.
Oh man, before they ban Paul Daly. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, so I think it could be quite interesting. Watch that space in terms of who buys this. Going back to the fights, we'll just rush these. Sajikov, I kind of felt he was going to beat Terrence McKinney, although I thought McKinney started quite well. He's kind of just looking like a dude that's got like 6 minutes in him, and that's a problem.
What, T-Rex?
Yeah,
I mean, maybe it's like a psychological thing. I don't think it's a cardio thing at all. It's just, that do or die mentality. I guess if you're not feeling like 110%, it probably works against you quite often.
is,
Talented
that
fighter though.
on the bounce?
Fuck, might be.
Bonfim knocked him out, submitted by Sadikov. No, he had a win against Eric Gonzalez, I think.
Ah, the ghost
in
pepper.
between. Yeah, but before that he lost to Drew Dober. So he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights.
Yeah, those losses are to talented guys. In today's UFC ecosystem's probably enough to get you a cut, but people like him. He's a rising star in some ways. I think they'll give him at least one more shot.
Maybe the Paddy the Baddy fight is looking a bit more appealing for both sides on that one now.
I think they're going to aim higher and less dangerous for Paddy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's just run through these prelims. A good win for Melsik Bagdasarian. It's a good fighter. Every time I've seen him fight, I think, damn, that guy could have something, particularly if the fight stays standing. Tucker is a tough dude. Estela Nunes dislocates her elbow. This was brutal to watch, man.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something very uncomfortable watching a professional cage fighter howling in pain.
Yeah, that was a really that was bent all kinds of the wrong way. It was painful to watch.
And that's her 4th loss in a row, I think, for Nunes. So she, you know what I mean? It's not like it's just the injury; it's the injury, and she's probably cut. And that's a rough road for her, man. That's a really tough road. And I'm not saying she beats like this Dudakova girl, undefeated, a lot of hype. She might have lost anyway, but you want to at least have the opportunity, particularly when your UFC career is on the line.
Yeah, and she had one close fight, but it's all finishes, and then I don't know if they cut her off of this unless she asks for it. I think it depends how long the layoff is. It depends how her contract's probably garbage, so I don't think that'll be an issue.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's tough to cut somebody after an injury like that, though. It just seems a bit unfair. But sometimes the gods are not with you. The gods, in many ways, have been very cruel to Melchizio Costa, but they've given him the ability to kick the shit out of somebody. Austin Lingo kind of got pieced up in this fight.
yeah, well, I mean, he definitely got fucking pieced up in this fight. I think Malkithiel is a good fighter. Very distinctive with that Vita guy. I hope they keep him around. Wait, what the fuck was I talking about? He won this fight, didn't he?
He won. Of course they're going to keep him around. He looked great.
I thought you
Austin
said
Lingo's the one who's lost 3 fights.
I know. I was thinking he'd won, and then like saying about the intro, I was like, shit, have I got that wrong?
I know,
because I'm having that kind of day.
I was referring to the Vitiligo.
Oh.
The gods have not been kind to him there, but they have given him the ability to kick the shit out of another human being. I believe was my exact quote.
I didn't realize we were shitting on people with skin conditions.
Hey, I wasn't shitting. I was just saying that, like, you can't tell me You can't tell me you have vitiligo and then say God dealt you double aces in the pocket. It's not how that works.
I
What
don't know.
happened is
I know a
God
guy with
dealt you like a
vitiligo.
jack and a six. God dealt you a jack and a six, and you fucking made that shit work for you.
I still know a guy with vitiligo. She was really hot. She didn't have any problems.
Oh, true.
I think sometimes it's good to stand out.
Yeah, it's not the way I'd like to stand out, but all credit to him. And I kind of like the fact that he sort of like embraced it. He doesn't try to cover it up. His hairstyle, everything is to kind of like incorporate it into his look. I do think that's quite cool.
Yeah, it's all about the way you carry it.
Very true. Um, Last four fights. Listen, these are all, these are two competitive fights and two pretty good performances. Evan Elder, this was a fun back and forth, but he was clearly better than Valdez, I thought. Tyson now, I thought you could have an argument to say he beat Maxim. I don't know if maybe they went with the hype there. And, I thought that was a close fight, but a good fight.
Yeah, it was close enough. I understand the split.
Alex Munoz looked very impressive against Deaton. And Aylin Perez mauled Ashley Evans.
Yeah, that
Up to that. Ashley Evans Smith.
that one was a bit ugly.
What does this not feel a little bit like the Ismagulov fight the other week? Do we not think maybe Ashley had like one fight left on a UFC contract and just kind of thought, fuck it. Like, I'll go in there, I'll get the paycheck, maybe I win. But
No,
it's an extra.
I think that is at this point in her career that probably is kind of her ceiling against that style of fighter. She did some good things to defend. It would have been easy to quit that fight earlier on. She made it to
Didn't
the
give
bell.
up.
Yeah, a little different. It wasn't like she retired and then came back. Like, I think Ismagulov has some physical things going on and just needed some fucking money. That's what I think with Ismagulov. Ashley Evans Smith, she came in there to fucking win. It did not go away. She did not drop her chin. Figuratively, she did get fucking owned though.
Yeah, Perez looks good. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. Well, that was last week's card. It was surprisingly good. This week's card, I'm hoping is surprisingly good because I've got to be honest, it's UFC London. I am not as enthused as I have been in the past.
Look, by UFC London
UFC London
standards, is it that great? No. However,
doesn't mean there's not fun fights.
There's a lot to be excited about. Paul Craig's middleweight debut, Tom Aspinall returning from injury, Mahmoud Muradov's back at welterweight, or is Brian Barber's actually come up to middleweight? Is that really what's happening?
Yeah,
That's
he's
insane.
at middleweight. He's at middleweight.
I do not like that fight for Brian. Anyway,
nor do I.
Chris Duncan's fighting.
We were talking about.
Go on.
We were talking about Ketlin Vieira dropping down to flyweight earlier, and we were saying now that Nunes is gone, are we going to see her back at bantamweight? She is back at bantamweight. She's fighting Pani Kinzad.
Of course. You got Davey Grant on the cards, and kind of my pick for banger of the night. Mark, I just fucking love wrestling Jacasey against Joel Alvarez, who is a long, rangy stand-up guy who probably nullify a lot of Jacasey's kind of kicking game by just sort of staying long enough, and has the jiu-jitsu to handle the wrestling. Interesting fucking fight, that one.
I love how you think this is going to be a banger because it clearly means that you believe we're still in the year 2019, which was when Mark Diakiese was throwing fun striking combinations. The Mark Diakiese of the last 2 years is basically just a lay and pray wrestler.
No. Alvarez is going to make it very hard for him to get entries. He's going to have to fight a very good, aggressive fight. And also he can't just lay and pray because, Joel's like so fucking long and his jiu-jitsu is quite good. Basically his jiu-jitsu is good enough. He really understands how to leverage all of that physical ability. He makes those long limbs work for him. Even if he can't tighten up the triangle on you, he's going to land a good few elbows. He's going to make you think twice about kind of entering his guard. I think potentially that one's going to be a fucking war.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that stands out with this card. There's no There's not a lot of the. I mean, aside from the main event, which we'll discuss in a second, there's no easy layup fights for some of these young British fighters coming up. I mean, they've given Chris Duncan Yanai Ashmuse, who's the guy that sent Patterson into the Shadow Realm earlier this year at UFC 286 in London. So we know that guy's dangerous. You've got tough fights. Davy Grant against an undefeated Daniel Marcos. That's a fucking tough fight. Danny Roberts not coming in on a great run of form, taking on Johnny Parsons. That's a tough fight.
Yep.
Diakese against Alvarez is tough.
Nathaniel Wood, Andre Feely. That's another good fight.
Big. That's a good fight for Wood, but we still haven't seen that much of him at featherweight.
Well, no, exactly.
This
This is
big guy for featherweight.
Yeah, and he's a great fighter. He's a very underrated fighter, but having beat Air Jordan and Boston Strong, this is another like. I wouldn't even say it's a step up from like Charles, but it's like you're putting a very, very solid portfolio together at 145. You know, if he wins this one impressively, it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with him.
Well, the other thing is, I think he might be fighting Feely. Feely's a big guy, but I think he might be fighting him at a good time. Like, this guy's been in the UFC for fucking ever. And obviously, he got the win against Algio, I think, in his last fight.
Yeah, he did split decision. But he was on a 3-fight loss streak before that. Last win, again, weirdly, was Jordan. But, you know, he's always been a bit back and forth. But he's been fighting in the UFC since 2013. You know, he was a Team Alpha male, highly thought of prospect. Just never quite put it together. And in a lot of ways, he's kind of like the Michael Johnson of 145. He can kind of beat anybody on his day, but he can also lose to just about fucking anybody at any given moment.
Yeah,
he's a crafty fight. Oh yeah, after the break, yeah, he's
maybe just the chin's going, because that's kind of the thing with him, is he'd always lose on decision, but be a really tough guy and still be in the fight. You might just be catching him. He's 33 now. Is this just, you know, like, Wood might be getting him at the right time, but it's still a big step up.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, like, Paul Craig's not gonna have an easy night against Muniz, man. Like, I don't think Paul Craig's ever fought anybody where they have comparable jiu-jitsu. And I'm curious to see, like, I've got high hopes for it, but I also have a worry that we might see like just a complete difference of like understanding of jiu-jitsu, or like the difference between somebody that's tapped out a bunch of strikers, but maybe can't do that to somebody who's got a deep understanding of the same discipline.
Yeah, both of them are very opportunistic with their submissions. I think that'll be nullified quite a lot. My biggest issue with this one is it's an awful point in your career when you already said you would have retired to be dropping an extra £20.
He's never been the biggest light heavyweight, though.
Yeah, he's also never weighed in at 185.
This is true. There's a lot of questions on that one. Other questions. I mean, Jai Herbert versus Faraz Ziam. Jai Herbert, he's had some tough losses. He has had some good wins, though, at the same time. But this is Faraz Ziam, he's going to bring it. And he's going to be grappling and striking and mixing it all together.
And he's a big boy.
That will not be... Yeah, that's not going to be an easy fight for Jai Herbert. And it's quite a sort of decisive fight in terms of what the next sort of section of his career looks like. And then kicking off the main card, Leroy Murphy, who we know is good, taking on Josh Coulabout. I mean, these guys, same number of fights. It's 1 win difference between them. Josh Coulabout, 11-1-1. Leroy Murphy, 12-0-1. But similar age, similar height, similar reach. That's going to be a tough fight. I don't know who wins that.
It'll be a fun fight as well. I'm still picking Chikesi Alvarez as my banger of the week, but that's a good one. McCann against Stoliarenko is a good fight as well.
It's a good fight for McCann, but it's also...
Well, if Stoliarenko can snatch her up in a submission, you know, McCann hasn't really got the chops to deal with that. McCann's got to fight carefully here.
Well, also, I don't... This is none of my business. This is just an opinion. But I don't like the way Molly McCann sometimes talks about her career. There's a few fights where You hear her talk about it and the way she approaches it. And quite often these are fights that she's lost. And there's a lot of language where it's like of course I'm going to win because I can't not win when I'm fighting in Liverpool and it's the first Liverpool card and I've got my own fans in front of me. There's no way I would ever let my fans down in Liverpool. And then she gets tapped out by Gillian Robertson. When she fought Tyler Santos and it's like, oh, it's the anniversary of her father passing away. And all the fight week, she's talking about how much it means, and there's no way she'd ever, not deliver when it's that emotionally significant for her. And obviously, then gets dominated and kind of emotionally leaves the gloves in, doesn't retire, but leaves the gloves in the octagon. A lot of people kind of feel maybe she's going to walk away. Blanchfield fight, going into that, she's talking about, oh, this is my moment. I've worked so hard for this. It's so important. I can't not deliver now that I'm fighting in New York and all this kind of stuff. And then she loses that fight. And I feel like sometimes we see the worst of McCann when she puts herself in this, well, I have to deliver. Like, I can't not win based on the situation I'm now in.
We've
And
also
there's
seen
a
her say the same shit when she wins, though. I think it's just kind of her general kind of like fight demeanor rhetoric. I wouldn't put too much behind it. I kind of know what you're saying, but I don't think it's that she builds up and she gets into her head too much. I think that, to be honest, she's just a very limited fighter. She has got a bit of power and she's super fucking aggressive. So, she risks it on that gambit. When it pays off, she looks like a very passionate, exciting fighter. When it doesn't pay off, and sometimes it doesn't because it's far from a perfect technique. She kind of looks exposed as what she is, a very limited fighter with a big mouth.
well, the advantage we've spoken about this a few times in the camp. The advantage she always has in women's MMA, particularly at flyweight, particularly at the moment, is that there is a level of aggression and desire to cause damage that she has in her striking that not every single fighter in women's MMA possesses, even high ranked, high level, very skillful fighters. There isn't the same intimidation factor. It's like she's got it and Draj has got it. You kind of feel like Shevchenko and Nunes and Fioro have all got it. Certainly somebody like Zhang Wei Li has it. But there's a lot of fighters like, Caitlin Chukagian. This is not a consideration when you fight her. And she is undoubtedly a high level fighter in this weight class. There's a lot of fighters where it's just not the same level of intimidation. Like Molly McCann will walk forward and is happy to eat punches and land something heavier on you. And that's not an easy thing to deal with. And if she can keep this fight on the feet, I think she can intimidate Stolyarenko, who cuts a lot of weight, certainly to make flyweight. We've seen her struggle on the scales, and I think is a little chinny.
Yeah, I mean, McCann should win this one, but if she gets it down at any point, like, yeah, I don't like it for Meatball.
No, I understand. It's certainly a risky fight, to say the very least. Um, Without any doubt.
And
What
then,
isn't a risky fight?
well, I feel like it is. Tibura is not
You
an easy
think
out. He's a decent fucking fighter. He's pretty fucking consistent. And Aspinall's coming back from a serious injury. It's really, it's a great litmus test. It's about as good a bounce back fight as I could think for Aspinall in terms of mixing a not the most dangerous fight you can take with a fight that when you win, people are actually gonna actually care about it, actually think about it. It's not nothing. You haven't been given a gimme like you kind of are reading it. I think Tibura is a very difficult guy, but then I also had a lot of time for Blagai Ivanov, and he got fucking cut. So stab to the heart.
it's not that this is a gimme fight, but what I feel they've done with Marcin Tybura is by giving Tom Aspinall, who pushed for Marcin Tybura, they're not throwing him back in at the deep end. They're not giving him a knockout artist. They're not giving him a super athlete. What they're giving him is a guy that is kind of 6 out of 10, maybe 5 out of 10 in a couple of categories, all across the board. Who's tough, who's not easy to finish, who'll mix it up, he'll eat some punches and still come forward and still try and put the pressure on you. But I just don't think there's a danger factor. This isn't a guy that's going to try and tear your legs to pieces by kicking them like a Tai Tuivasa would. This isn't a guy where if you make one mistake due to rust, you're going to get hit with a right hand that sends you to the shadow realm. This isn't even a Sergey Spivak where it's like there's a genuine, if you fuck up and go on your back and get taken down, there's a real submission threat that you need to be aware of. This is somebody that, like, if Tom Aspinall is anything close to what we've seen from Tom Aspinall pre-knee injury, he probably goes through this guy pretty quickly.
We'd
And
hope
then once
so,
he does that,
but
and then once he does that, we're not talking about, you know what I mean? Like, usually if you're fighting a Tabura, the next step up would be like a Volkov or all the rest. But we already know that Tom Aspinall can beat those kind of guys. So if he wins this fight, it's going to be Curtis Blades, that level of guy. And so just the fact that if he beats Tabura, that's the jump up we're making, kind of tells me, like, listen, I'm not saying you're not doing a favor to Tabura. If he beats Aspinall on Saturday, his career takes a gigantic leap up. There's no question about that. But the expectation is you get some rounds in, fight probably goes at least to the second or the third. There's not a huge danger of re-injury and all the rest. And you win this, and then you get to have the big fights again.
no, absolutely. But don't sleep on Tybura, you know. Beat Ivanov, beat Romanov, beat Rothwell, beat Spivak. To be honest, if he didn't lose that fight to Volkov, which he definitely lost, but he'd be on a fucking, what, 8-fight win streak?
Something like that. Something
So,
like that. I mean, he's not bad, dude. I'm not saying he's not bad. What I'm saying is he's not dangerous. And I feel like the thing that you don't want when you've been out for a year, when you're coming back off a bad injury, is it's the dangerous guy that can cause you loads of problems.
true, but at
What
the
they're
same
giving
time,
him,
I think if you have physical gifts and technical abilities like Aspinall does, and you're coming back off a bit of a layoff and a serious injury, is sometimes the most dangerous guy is the guy that doesn't make mistakes, the guy that's going to be very difficult to beat, the guy that's going to not be in your face all the time and give you opportunities to really kind of get a quick night and an early shower. The most dangerous guy is the guy that's going to make you fucking work for it for 3, 4, 5 rounds. It could be a difficult one. I think it's going to be fun. Hopefully, though, Aspinall is right back where he was when he was training for Blades and fucking runs through this guy, and we anoint him as the heir apparent.
well, I think that's the thing that I'm trying to remember as well. If we wind the clock back 1 year to before UFC London July, the second UFC London last year, we had every expectation that he had at least a 50-50 shot of beating Curtis Blades. And minus a knee injury, and obviously we didn't really get to see how that fight goes. It's just, I suppose that's where my reservations on how competitive this fight would go to is if we weren't talking about a year layoff and they booked this fight, there's no question that everyone post Volkov being finished in 2 minutes, everyone thinks Aspinall finishes him in 6 minutes max.
Yeah,
It's only because he's been out for a knee injury that
obviously.
now we're
Yeah.
saying, oh, this is going to be a good fight and competitive. So that means, in my opinion, it is a gimme. And you know what? I'm okay with it because there's so many tough fucking fights for the British fighters on this card that having at least one at the end where there's no such thing as a guarantee, but we can feel confident that we're going to see the hometown, the home country boy get it done.
Yeah. It's that age
I'm
old
not
thing.
against.
You're the optimist and I'm the pessimist. I'm
Yeah.
worried about the injury. You're like, injury, fuck that injury. This is just the way you and me look at the world sometimes.
Well, dude, listen, I don't know how bad his knee is. I know that his knee was fucked going into a few fights. So I'm hoping that the fact that he's actually been able to get surgery and get it repaired and all that is a positive. Guys get injuries, man. Like, you can't. When a guy's been injured once, you can't get the injury spook. It's when you see the same thing fail on multiple occasions. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
remember when we were talking about the leg kicks with Anthony Smith, where it's like nobody said, oh, fuck, that's a giant problem and I'm worried about that after the John Jones fight. But it's after the Jones fight and then the Rakic fight and then the Ankalaev fight and then the Johnny Walker fight, where it's just like, yeah, dude, that leg's collapsing like more quickly than just, yeah, the guy landed some good kicks and the damage built up. That's when it becomes a worry. one injury, man, we've seen guys come back from horrific injuries and knee injuries. And he was out for a
Absolutely.
year. A year's not great, but it's not the worst I've seen.
It's
No, I
not the
feel
longest layoff for a serious injury, all right? He's potentially things are looking good. Plus, there's that I don't know whoever fucking said it originally, but the first time I heard it was Donovan McNabb, so I always attribute the quote to him. But you know, you always play hard. You just is what it is. You always play hard. There's no other way to train for it.
yeah, and in MMA that is very, very true. It's a card. I'm excited. The problem, I'll tell you what the issue is. 290 was fucking ridiculous. 291 is at the end of July. So it it's hard to kind of stand out in a month of mixed martial arts when that's what's going on around you, especially since next Saturday we've also got some sick boxing because we've got oh my word, Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford. So that it's hard to be as excited about London when it's wedged in between some huge fights, some huge cards. And I would like to use that as a segue because obviously getting into a little bit of news as we finish off the podcast, we need to talk about some major developments that's happened. UFC 291 looking a little different. We don't have Paulo Costa fighting Ikram Aliskerov because Paulo Costa decided to throw a tantrum and not fight, and has now been rewarded with Hamzat Chimaev at 294. How do you feel about that first bit of news?
294, is that the pay per view or the weight?
That is the pay per view. It may also turn out to be the weight. I'm not a. I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, I'll believe it when they actually walk. These flaky motherfuckers.
How do you feel about Aliskerov versus Imavov for 291 as a replacement?
I gotta be honest. I thought it was against Elite originally that they'd replaced them, and I was pretty excited for that. Imavov,
That
I
was the
think
rumor.
I'm just as G'd up. I think that's going to be a good fight.
It's the better step up, really, for Aliskerov. Like he
Uh,
may have well beaten Paulo Costa, but I'm not a
yeah,
fan of the guy
I've got
having
to
one
believe
fight and
this
then
is the
fighting.
time to fight Costa. You know, Costa's an absolute fucking melt. Kind of always has been, but if there was a time to fight him, it's probably now.
Yeah, I mean, the more you have to assume, the more secret juice he takes, the stronger he will become.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the more secret juice he takes, the less he actually trains MMA.
But yes, that's also possible. But it's a good fight for Aliskerov. Sets up, keeps UFC 291 looking like a super fun card. I mean, some of the fights, even on the prelims, it's just an absolutely ridiculous card. I can't wait for that. But we have had some official fight news announced because we have a title fight for Abu Dhabi. It is Makachev taken on for the second time, Charles Oliveira, back in Abu Dhabi. Are we going to see a repeat of what we saw last year? Or do you think that we're going to see the Charles that we saw against Dariush?
Yeah, I think we're going to get something closer to that, Charles. I think we're going to get the fight that we should have got. I don't think it necessarily means that Olives is going to have more success, but I think it's going to be a much better fight. It's going to take
Is it
a little bit for him to like knock out or submit Makhachev, let's be honest. If he submits him, it's going to come from an unusual mistake, or he's going to have to rock him first. And Makhachev has enough power in that jab that he can fight somewhat more conservatively. I think Charles is going to make it a way more fun fight than last time. He's not going to come in as stressed out and broken as he was last time. Ultimately, I just see a closer fight where Islam wins, though.
Is it a bit of a worry that Charles initially said he's not going to be ready for UFC 294, and now he's ended up taking the fight? Do you think maybe he felt he wasn't going to be ready and they put the right amount of paper in front of him? And is that something to consider?
No, I think he understands his self-worth. I don't think he gets pushed around anymore. He seems to have the right amount of self-belief when it comes to these things. If something's changed, it's something in his favour, physically or in terms of recuperation or whatever. Maybe an injury is not as serious as he first thought. Maybe it's something where they have to nurse it anymore and they can start going. Whatever it is, I don't think that Charles would enter a rematch this important if he was compromised.
Good answer. Fights that are not 100% booked, but are in the works. Obviously, we've touched on Costa versus Hamza being heavily reported for Abu Dhabi as well, making that card look super exciting. Does leave some questions. Obviously, we got wondering what's going to happen with Kamaru Usman. People thought he was going to be fighting Hamza at the catch weight. But other news, Dricus du Plessis, his foot swollen. He went in a bit banged up to the Whitaker fight. He can't turn around for UFC 293. And Adesanya is now pushing heavily for Sean Strickland to headline in Sydney. Now, we've also obviously had news about a title being vacated, which we'll touch on in a second, and might end up affecting your opinion on what they do with the Sydney card. But two questions in regards to Strickland. Do you think that's a good idea to have that as a fight if Dricus needs a bit more time to be ready to fill the Sydney card? And do you think that the press conference and the build up to the fight is going to be more or less dark with Strickland? Because obviously you're not going to have the whole South Africa racism, real African thing. But Sean Strickland, I think, is way more likely to say some absolute batshit crazy shit building up to that.
I think the DDP would be the better press conferences and the more wild shit, just because Izzy does not seem to be able to contain himself around him. Strickland, Izzy, it could go either way. Maybe they go like screaming in each other's faces, barking like wild dogs. Maybe they're actually weirdly like respectful of each other. I don't know, but
I don't know. I just feel like Sean Strickland. Izzy's done enough dumb shit on the internet that I kind of feel like Strickland could really bury him. And what I'd say is that if you look at the press conference for 281, sorry, not 281, 276, when it was Izzy versus Cannonier and Strickland versus Alex Pereira, it did look, Izzy didn't win those exchanges with Strickland. He got a little bit frustrated. He was made to look a little bit foolish. And things that Strickland's going to bring up straight away. He's going to bring up the I'm the Black Dragon, I'm Chinese video. He's 100% going to bring up the Izzy jacking off his dog video.
I don't know that he will.
He brought it up on the Joe Rogan show, dude. That's one of the funniest clips you'll ever see. Is it Sean Strickland trying so hard to get Jamie to search for the video of Izzy wanking his dog. And you could just tell that like Jamie does not want to bring this up. Joe keeps giving him signals like, no, Jamie definitely hasn't seen that video. Have you, Jamie? He tries to bring it up on his phone. It's too funny. The guy's got no filter. He's just going to be outrageous.
What you say on a Joe Rogan podcast and what you say to the champ that's effectively campaigning for your title shot, I don't know.
I'm not saying you'd say it before the fight's signed. But you
know
what I mean?
No.
The press conference building up to the fight is he's not going to pull out because you bring up a fucking video of him jacking the dog off.
Yeah, but it's not also. I mean, as a fighter, you have to be aware that guys athletes pull out of fights all the fucking time for a multitude of reasons. If you mug off Izzy in a way that Izzy's not cool with it and not marketable enough, if Izzy plays up an injury or an illness or whatever and pulls out of that fight, which he can do quite easily, and it doesn't look good, but it happens, you're not going to get that rematch rebooked until after they've done the DDP fight.
True.
So it's not equal. He's not the one with the belt. He's not the one with the golden ticket. He's not the number one contender. If I was him, it would kind of play on my mind a little bit. Okay, this guy's reached a little bit to give me the title shot now because he wants to do the event there and then. How bad does he want to do it against me, and how bad does he want to just do it at that time? Because I know he wants to fight the other guy. Like, I don't know.
Well,
Maybe Strickland doesn't even fucking think about these things. He does come across to me as quite a smart guy sometimes when he's not being weird as fuck. But I don't know. I could see it going either way. Maybe it does go batshit crazy. The thing with like DDP is I know it's going to be batshit crazy.
well, it's funny, I was talking to my dad about this, who obviously doesn't really follow very loosely, doesn't really watch it, but will watch like the odd fight, and he knows who Adesanya is. And I was kind of trying to explain the whole fact that Izzy's a little bit cringe and he's kind of been a champion for long enough that he's got his lovers and his haters. And sort of is explaining the whole DDP thing and sort of saying Izzy's going a bit far. My dad brought up that basically Muhammad Ali did exactly the same thing in his career when he fought a guy called Joe Bugner. Um, Joe Bugner was very amicable towards Muhammad Ali when the fight got signed in the build-up. And then there was one situation where they were having a conversation. They bumped into each other in like the corridor of a hotel or the lobby of a hotel or something like that. And we're just having like quite a reasonable, respectful, friendly conversation until Ali saw that there were some journalists that were approaching. And as soon as the journalists were in earshot, Ali immediately started screaming at him, going, "How dare you call me an N-bomb?" And basically he's just started screaming at Joe Bogner, "Don't you ever call me that word. I'm going to fuck you up, white boy," all this kind of stuff. And Joe Bogner had no idea what was going on. He never called him the N-word, but was just standing there. Obviously, all the cameras that get shot in. Then after the journalists all leave, he sort of looks at Muhammad Ali and goes, "What the hell was that?" Ali goes, "Show business, man. We just sold the fight." So there is like one thing that I think Izzy does deserve a little bit of credit for is he's done a very good job of building, like turning his opponents into rivals. You think about how the build up to the Costa fight was marketed and how that was meant to be his big rivalry. Then he had that back and forth with Vittori. Then obviously Alex Pereira. He's in the situation where he's got this whole African thing rivalry going with DDP. And if he ends up fighting Sean Strickland, there's going to be a build up and a butting of heads and arrivals there. So whether you love Izzy or hate him, whoever you root for, he's kind of done a good job of sort of building up the bad blood or creating that animosity with the people he's fighting.
Yeah. Now let's talk about why that not might matter at all. Jamul Hill has rescinded
Vacated.
his title. He's going to be injured. He's going to be out for a little while. I guess a lot of it is just being a man of honor. Part of it is after the way Yuri did the same kind of thing, same gesture. I think Jamul respected that. He liked that, and straight off the back of that, I guess you can't make Yuri wait for his his shot at redemption just because you're fucking laid up and recovering. So, could they potentially get Yuri in and throw him up against someone like Ankalaev or whoever, or let's assume that, or not assume, but like hypothetically, if the winner of Blachowicz Bahia is a real quick no knocks taken finish, they turn around nice and quick. So you've got that vacant belt at 205. As you pointed out before we started talking, there's literally no other options available. If they want to have a belt on the line, it's got to be 185 or 205. And if it's going to be 185, it's probably going to be Strickland.
The only other belt that I could think of potentially being on the line is if they put a vacant title fight for the bantamweight title. But even if they were to do that, I don't see that being a headline for Sydney. I would see that being like a co-main event, or maybe a co-main event on one of the future cards.
Yeah, they're going to struggle to sell the title eliminator at this stage. You really need to clear up that division first.
Yeah. The issue I have, I don't see Ankalaev getting it because he's coming off a draw that was not overly exciting, kind of pissed Dana White off. And it's not to say that they have any animosity towards Ankalaev, but I don't think he's not an exciting enough guy or a big enough name that they'd want to just slot him straight in, particularly if you're going to have a former middleweight champion that just had a whole saga with Izzy and is a name that casuals know and like and is exciting, fighting Jan Blachowicz, who's a former champion himself and an exciting guy that people generally, okay, the casuals maybe don't like so much, but has a big market in Poland, exciting guy, get some knockouts, would have earned the opportunity by beating Pereira or vice versa if Pereira wins. The
Well,
only danger with that one is it kind of depends how much damage the guys take. If Pereira or Blachowicz win in 2 minutes in the first round, yeah, you can talk about them making a swing around and fighting Yuri in September. But if that's a 3-round war, or if it's a boring fight, that's when the question marks start coming in.
yeah, the other thing is like phone calls have already been made and things are in process, but if they can't get what they want, how they want, do you think they remove that co-main and set it as the main event for the Faken title?
Oh, for 291.
Yeah.
I believe that rumors were discussed about doing this already, but I don't think they'd have it as the main event. I think they would keep Poirier versus Gaethje as
No,
the
no,
main
no, no,
event.
no. I mean, move it to 294.
No, no, I don't think they do that. I don't think they do that. I think so. Here's the thing. Here's the conundrum they've got with 291. It's in fucking altitude, serious altitude. So, do I believe that if 291 was in Vegas, they could have made an easier phone call to Blachowicz and Pereira and said, "Listen, guys, 2 extra rounds. You get to fight for the belt. I know you haven't prepared for a 5-rounder, but belt's on the line. What do you say?" I have a feeling both guys would have been pretty happy to take that. But they're already fighting fucking 1,000 meters above fucking sea level. 2 extra rounds is not the same sell. It completely changes the fight. They don't have a chance to market it. I think they just have to view that as a title eliminator, man.
Wait,
And then it's just a case of do
I
you
thought you
get
said
lucky?
294 was in Sydney.
No, 294 is Abu Dhabi, 293 is in Sydney.
Sorry. Sorry, that's what I mean. They're moving it to 293. I got the numbers wrong.
They
But
I don't think
either
they'll do
way,
that because they need that fight for 291. Like 291's a really good card, but with no official title fight on the line, you need to have that banging significant co-main event, especially after Costa got dropped off the card.
I don't know, man. They don't seem to care about putting together stat cards anymore. It seems to be just having title fights headlining pay-per-views. That seems to be their business model.
Well, if that was true, they never would have made Dustin Poirier versus Gaethje the main event.
No, they did it for the BMF title because that's what they fucking do.
It's not a real belt.
Yes, we all
It's
know
not a
that,
real
but
belt.
they're marketing it that way.
It's a recognition of a life of two guys who give everything and have a lifetime in the game. That's what it is. It's what they would have done when Henderson fought Shogun all those years ago for the first time, if they thought of it back then. I mean, what's crazy about the Gaethje Poirier fight is that you have, since they fought each other, I believe they have exactly the same records.
Yeah.
6 wins, 4 finishes, 2 decisions, 2 losses. Both losses are in title fights to Khabib and Oliveira.
Yeah, I still think the UFC view that as an actual title fight, and I still think that they could very well strip out that co-main if calls don't go their way. They just don't
Right.
value the quality of this anymore. It's a little bit bullshit.
Well, listen, I'm not going to go that far, but I hope they don't do that because that means that I have to watch Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green as the co-main event. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I'm not excited for that fight, but I think we all know it's not going to be as competitive as it would have been a few years ago, especially on the Tony side. I don't need that getting full highlight as the co-main event slot. But we will find out. Time will tell. Anything else you want to discuss? I think we've covered all the fights that have been announced. We've covered the
Yeah,
injury.
we didn't really go much into the McGregor shit other than kind of talking about it in a general sense. But to be honest, I think we've probably touched on that enough. We don't know enough about the assault at the funeral, and
Well,
yeah, tough.
something happened at a funeral. We don't know what it is. Time
Yeah,
will reveal all.
yeah, but I think because I hate him so much for the Ultimate Fighter, not getting the clean sweep means that they're not going to give him half of the other half of Michael Chandler's guys to train, I assume. So hopefully they just put that semi final at the end, and then that's as much of McGregor as we have to deal with. Mostly get a focus on Chandler's guys.
Ah, no, dude.
Enjoy the rest of the
What are
series a
the
little more.
odds? What are the odds that one of Chandler's guys gets injured and one of McGregor's guys gets like a backup slot and then ends up going to the final? That's what I reckon happens.
It's possible, but there was only really Cody that got hurt, and he's going to fight through it. And he's not in the same weight class as McGregor's guy that got through, so it's going to mean another Chandler guy advancing anyway, probably. Brad
Okay, fair
Katona.
enough.
Brad Katona might make an argument about switching teams, but that'd be it.
Well, we will watch that space. To be honest, I think we can call that a show. We were going to maybe touch on some of the Disney disasters, but we like to talk about competitive fights here. And it doesn't look like Disney are winning their economic battle right now. Best of luck to them. UFC's on at a reasonable time. And obviously next week, we're going to be doing our preview for UFC 291. So watch this space. Have a great week, everybody. We will have Miguel back next week, finally. So we'll be in one place in video and audio. Thank you for bearing with us in the meantime. And we hope you all enjoyed the fight. Have a great week and catch you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye, Laurie. Bye, Dave.